Okay, we are on, we're still in chapter 22 on another. We're getting close to the end.
Yay!
So long, yeah, we've been saying it for a long time. It's in this book of Mesilas, the Feldheim edition, page 157. And we're right in the middle of that second paragraph where he says, remove the mitznefes and meaning to take off the airs. Like let's just read the whole thing. Remove the turban and lift off the crown, meaning whoever is great in this world will be small in the world to come. And conversely, anyone who's small in this world is destined for greatness in the world to come. You know, there's a lot of people, this is rabbis, this is an occupational hazard with rabbis, that we'd use the position of the rabbi. I'm the rabbi of the whatever it happens to be, and we get caught up in our sense of self-importance. So it's a very what we really need to do is focus on the message that we want, the force of our concepts. Many of the greatest rabbis that we've had did not have the title of rabbi. They weren't made a rabbi. There's a Barbanel. When a Barbanel was escaping from Spain, he went to different communities, and he writes, I forget who brings this down, in the Barbanel. He writes that he was in one particular show, and they have a very strange thing there. What's that? They have this thing called a rabbi. Like, we have kings, and we have kohanim, priests, and we have a shofet, a judge, but there's no such thing as a rabbi. So where do people get off this idea that you appoint someone as a rabbi? And traditionally, and we're definitely in the more Haredi communities, that the fact that you're called a rabbi doesn't mean very much. You don't have an official title. You become the rabbi that people go to. Right? No one appointed Moshe Feinstein the Gadol Hador. He didn't apply for the job. So he got the title because he was recognized for his greatness. The same thing with Chavetz Chaim and various leaders, many often the leaders of our people. So when you use your particular position, and this is not just a problem with being a rabbi or whatever it happens to be, or any position you have, but just being a mother or father is also a very risky, thing to get into, because you could easily use your authority as a without really thinking about or being genuine with your words. So that's something to think about. Humility is to connect and to understand what's really going on, to get out of the delusions we have and see what's really going on. I don't know if that's making any sense.
So in other words, you're saying, instead of focusing on your self-importance, focus on the important work that you're required to do, or that you're in this world to do.
Right. It's like your kids. It's very easy to use your authority to get them to do what you want them to do, and sometimes you have
in this family.
You've got boys, so you've got got a tough job, right? But it's, you know, when there's definitely when they're younger, and you pay for it later on in life, because if they don't, if it isn't meaningful, if it hasn't, if what you tell them to do doesn't resonate with them, it doesn't work for them, they're going to remember it, and you're going to pay for it later. So you got to be very, very careful how you use that authority. So in general, that in general, you need to. This is the idea that he's saying, right? Don't use your position as in how you relate to people. Okay.
Like if you tell them to clean up something just because you want them to get out of your hair, instead of cleaning up something that they really need to clean up for themselves, then they're gonna. Is that an example of?
You can talk to them so that in a way that they understand what you are saying is true, or you can talk to them in a way that you're overbearing. Now, you know, sometimes you do need to be a little overbearing, right? But it's got to be used sparingly, right? The house needs to be cleaned, and it's your job. It's very different than, you know, if you don't do it, I'm going to get upset. Is that making sense?
But again, it's focusing on a goal rather than what an individual wants.
Yeah. So that's what he says. He says anybody who makes themselves small in this world is destined for greatness in the next world, because the things that are really important in life have are not very big in this world. I had a class this afternoon, so I asked the woman who's it was a Zoom class. I said, you know, if God forbid there was a fire in your house, what would you save? So I said to her, so she said, I would save the notes that my husband wrote to me. Right? So I said, oh, that's a good example. I said, if you had a Picasso on the wall and or the note from your husband, which one would you save? She said, the note from my husband. Right? So I you know, right? In this world, the note from my husband is not going to fetch much in the Sotheby's auction. Right? But in the next world, it's going to be a big deal. Right? So that's what Hazal is saying here, is the things that were important in the next world are small in this world. If you make these things that are small in this world important to you, then in the next world, they're going to be in the world that you're going to be living in, the important world, you're going to have a lot to talk about. There's a lot of people that make the unimportant things, this world, very big. So they make sure. I was just with somebody when was it? It was last week. Oh, last week. So he lives in this very, very, very gated community in Florida. And I don't think he's going to be watching this video. But he said to me a very interesting thing. He says, you know, all of my neighbors and friends, they all spend all their money on these expensive cars. He says, I think it's just silly. I drive an old Hyundai, right? It's like it doesn't really make any difference. Like Warren Buffett, the same kind of thing. So when you're focused on, when you think like having the biggest car, the biggest house, and all these kind of things are important, then you're going to miss the really important things in life.
Because your focus is not where it's supposed to be.
You're right, on what's really important. So it gives another example. One should always learn from the wisdom of his master. For the Holy One, blessed be he, bypassed all the mountains and hills and chose Mount Sinai as a dwelling place for the divine presence because of its loneliness. Similarly said, for the remnant, that's another idea. But first of all, right, there's a very famous Chazal that why did God pick Har Sinai? Because of its loneliness. Well, he didn't pick one of the big mountains like Mount Everest. He picked a very low mountain. So what does that mean?
Easier to climb.
Easier to climb. And Moshe has to go up a few times. Right? So what does that mean? Like God can just as easily descend on a big mountain, a small mountain. What does that mean? So you see, right, you go watch a movie, right? You know me a little bit, right? So you've seen some of the videos I put out, right? So when you get involved a little bit in the movie business, when you've got a movie on the screen, when you're watching a movie on the screen, the amount of room that movie takes up is very, very little. It's a very flat screen. It's a two-dimensional piece of cloth, right? Or whatever it's printed or whatever you're watching it on, LCD screen, whatever it happens to be. But the production of the movie is enormous. The back lots are always bigger than the front lots, right? When you're operating on someone, you're a doctor, you're operating on somebody, right? Oh, Larry's with us. Larry's joining us slowly. He's coming in. When you're working on somebody, hey, Larry, welcome to the club.
Good to see you. I've missed you.
Yes, good to see you too. Welcome back.
Our class went a little later.
Yeah, good. Well, it's good to have you every time. So when you're a doctor, as much as whatever you're doing in the operating theater, it's all the backup that makes everything work. The backup is always much bigger. The back lot is always much bigger than the front lot. In everything in life, right? When NASA sends a rocket up to Mars, right, the machine they send up is a very small representation of the enormous amount of technology and work that goes into everything else. Is it making sense? So the front lot is always small. The mountain is always small. If you're going to make the front lot what people see as big, right? You see this with actors a lot, right? They all want to be actors, and then when they start to become successful, they want to be directors because they realize the real power is not the actors. The actors just get to play a script that someone else. They have very little control of what really is going on. It looks like they're the big shots, but they're not. It's the directors that really control and can decide and determine what movie is going to be produced and how it's going to look and the message that's given across. And the message really is really what's important. The more that something is seen, the less importance it really has. Is that making sense? This is, by the way, right? I don't want to get too controversial here. This is, by the way, right, how important women are in society and why a woman's role is a much more modest or hidden role because it's much more powerful.
Are you listening, men?
They all know it's true. They all know it's true, right? Unfortunately, Western society has devalued the value of women, and there's only a value if they do something that men are known for.
It's much worse than devaluing, because now they're going after the women who are celebrating the traditional mom stay-at-home thing. They're like attacking them as if they're like, terrorists or something. It's ridiculous.
Well, that's not like universal, but it's sort of, Rabbi, it sounds
social. There's a significant social presence online.
Well, look, there's everything you could want, but Rabbi, it sounds like what is the saying? Behind every great man is a great woman, or something like that.
No, behind every great man is a surprise mother-in-law.
Yeah, that too. That too.
Right. Yeah, so behind every great man is a great woman, 100%. Right? You find very rarely do you ever find successful men who aren't married. It does happen, but it's very, very rare. Right? I'm sure they had their mother was a big influence. But that's the secret source. There's a theory. It's not mine, but I've heard that Dennis Prager talks about it. He heard this somewhere, that the reason the Western world is so took off technologically is because of the respect they have for women. There's a book called Bernard is a I think he's a Harvard professor. Forget his last name. The book's called What Went Wrong. Oh, I forget his name. Bernard something. So he wrote this book, What Went Wrong, and he up until I don't know when it was, 14th, 15th century, the Arabs were the leaders in education and technology, mathematics, science.
Oh, Bernard Lewis.
Bernard Lewis, thank you very much. Right.
What went wrong? The clash between Islam and modernity in the Middle East.
Right. So he said that the Arabs realized that they were falling behind, and they needed to upgrade the way of thinking. And interestingly, when it comes to the military, many things they would not change. But one of the things that they did change was their military. There's no Arab country that has a traditional Arab military. It's all westernized. Uniforms and the way it's organized and all kinds of things like that. They're all Western thinking programs, right? The royalty and the society and all other things, that's all Arab, classic Arab. But he said that there are three things that the Arabs had a problem with. One was the infidel, two was slaves, and three was women. And they made peace with the infidel, right? They didn't, welcome them in with open arms, but they treated them as equals. They banned slavery. They got rid of slavery, but they couldn't make peace with women. They just couldn't do it. They couldn't that far. They couldn't go, and until today. He said, for instance, Turkey, which is the most advanced of any of the Arab countries, did under Ataturk, the revolution, he recognized that we have to make peace with women. We have to give women rights. And that's why Turkey is the most successful Arab country. It's not classically an Arab country, but it borders both Western world and the Asian world. There's this Bernard Lewis talking. So it's a very interesting thing. So the Western world did that when they made marriage. They took marriage seriously. The Catholics came in and went to the other extreme of the pagans. The pagans had marriage, but it was a very loose affiliation. They didn't take it seriously. The Catholics, to counter that, to deal with that, they went the other extremes, that you can't even get divorced for any reason. Right? Now that's more than Judaism says, but nevertheless they felt they had to do that to deal with the pagans. And when they did that, it civilized the Western world, because you had to deal with your wife. Like, this was a real game. This was like your home. This is your family. That's it. You're done. No more going around. This is it, right? And it changed the Western world, because when you have to listen to a woman, it's very civilizing. Nothing personal. Some of my best friends are women, right? But you see that, like I was just talking about that with the Gaza Strip, right? It's all men, right? I'm not saying there aren't some wicked women in there, right? But the people who are doing all this bad stuff is men. It's very male dominated, right? And the people who, there's not a lot of people, but the people in the West, in the Gaza Strip, who are complaining about Hamas, it's a ratio of about 9-1 women, right? So the women get it. Like, this is a bad deal for everybody, right? The women get it. So women are a very civilizing force, but it's a hidden force. They're not going to be civilizing if they become the generals. They're civilizing because they, it's something that the Western world understood, Christianity understood. Whoever has the ear of a child's first 5 years of life has the future. That we all understand that.
The ear?
Yeah, it was what you tell your children the first 5 years is the truth. That's going to be how the society is going to be, right? So, so the one more point in this is he says, let's just carry on here in the book.
What page are you on, please?
We're on page
zoomed in.
157, 158.
Thank you.
We just started the top of 158.
158, right? For the remnant of his inheritance refers to one who treats himself like a remnant. But in other words, like you treat yourself, it doesn't mean like you're disparate. It doesn't say you think yourself as nonsense. Like, you're cutting a garment, and there's always a little bit of cloth that's left over that it can't be used for anything. It's too small to make a suit, right? So it's the remnants. It's left over. So anybody who treats himself as left over, right? Those are the people that are going to be. Those are the people going to survive, right? So what does that mean? So I think we've talked about this before. The 20th century saw more inventions per square minute than any other time in human history. The 20th century was a remarkable century. It started off with the first manned flight in 1904, and it ended up with the internet. A complete revolution, upended everything about society. The whole world's a different world. You would not recognize the world today, not because of travel and cities and food and all this other kind of stuff, but it's a complete, the whole way the world works is completely different from any other time in history. There's not been an area in our lives that has not been impacted by all these inventions, right? It was a remarkable century, right? If the 21st century could get 10% of that, who knows? It's impossible to imagine, right? So of all the inventions of the 20th century, which one was the most meaningful? Now, everybody who invented anything thought that their invention was going to be the thing that was going to change mankind for the better, whether it's the telephone, or it's the automobile, or it's the airplane, or it's, mechanical pencils and big pens, whatever it happens to be, right? Exactly, right? So which one was the most meaningful? There's which invention of every invention of the 20th century had the most meaningful impact on humanity?
The one Iran wants to get.
Oh, right?
We know this from before.
We've heard this before, right? Nuclear weapons, right?
Well, meaningful, not necessarily in a good way.
No, in a totally good way. We are the longest experience of peace, prolonged peace in the Western world, precisely because of nuclear weapons. Anybody who studies a little bit of history will know that the Cuban Missile Crisis should have been the Third World War. right? They did not learn from the Second World War. They were going to go fight it out again with the Cuban Missile Crisis. The only reason it wasn't is the nuclear weapons. Both not Gorbachev, forget his name.
Khrushchev.
What?
Khrushchev.
Khrushchev, right? Thank you. Khrushchev and Kennedy both realized this is a bad idea. Khrushchev more than Kennedy, but they said it's a bad idea, right? And it was everything they'd learned from the Second World War led them to the Cuban Missile because they didn't learn the lesson, right? And when they got there, right, when the Cuban Missile Crisis, when they got there, they both realized what this means if we go the next step. And they both pulled back. Khrushchev more than Kennedy. Khrushchev lost his job and Kennedy was shot a little while after that, right? But anyway, whatever the reason is, right, there's nuclear weapons, right? Now, how come nuclear weapons had such a meaningful impact? So you know who invented the nuclear weapon?
Oppenheimer.
No, it was under his direction. He created the Manhattan Project. Right? He pulled the team together, right? But you know who actually came up one night? Oh, I know what we should do. We've got the plus wire with the negative wire with a bunch of, gooey electrons in the middle. I don't know how you build a nuclear weapon, right?
Good.
Right? And someone figured it out, right? You probably know who did it.
You don't mean Einstein?
No, it was.
No, I was hoping he didn't.
They wouldn't let Einstein on the Manhattan Project because Roosevelt he was a communist, right? No, you know why you don't know?
Because he doesn't want his name to be ever known.
He didn't want his name on it. Exactly. He didn't want to be known. Scientists tend to be leftist liberals, and he didn't want to be known as the man who invented the weapon of greatest mass destruction in the history of the humanity. He didn't want to, he's not going to get invited to dinner parties. So he didn't want his name on it. It's a now debate between the families of two people with whose father it was. Right?
Why do they want that distinction?
Because now they recognize how meaningful it was.
Oh, I still wouldn't want my name on it.
Okay, I'm with you. But now, why was it so meaningful? Because there's a famous quote from the Kotzker Rebbe. He said like this, where is God? Where do you find God? So all his students answered, in Jerusalem, in heaven, in Israel, in the world, and right? Different. He said, no. He said, you know where you find God?
Where we let him in.
Oh, you'd make a great team. Let me introduce you to Zita.
Oh, yes.
You should go on a date, you guys. Right? Right? Where man lets him in. Right? All these inventions that everyone wanted, right? They're all going to save humanity. But they made sure they put their name on it. Invented by Joe Schmo. You follow? Nuclear weapons, they didn't have his name on it. So they let God in. So God said, you think this is going to destroy humanity? It should have destroyed humanity. Because there's no invention, there's no weapon they ever came up with they didn't do. Right? There's none. Right? So it should have destroyed humanity. So God says, I'm going to use this one to save humanity, which is typical God's style. He likes the very thing that you think is going to destroy you is going to save you. The very thing you think is going to save you is going to destroy you. Right? That's typical that's God's signature.
How did they let him in?
What's that?
How did they let him in?
How did
By
what?
not putting his name on it.
Yeah.
By not putting they're not saying I am the one who created the nuclear bomb.
Exactly.
Atomic bomb.
To quote Harry Truman, there's nothing that cannot be achieved if you're willing to not take the credit.
You mean kind of like the streets of San Francisco being cleaned up?
How's that relate to that?
So like there's nothing you can, like, if you put your will into something, then it can happen.
Yeah, if you're willing to, if you don't care about taking credit. This is why parenting works. Because parents don't care about taking credit.
Who they take credit with? Like,
Right.
what would they do? Like have a parent,
No, but
meeting?
you see,
Well, my
when
kid
you
is
talk
better
to
than
your
yours
spouse,
because
you don't say, I taught him math, I did the homework, I did this, I did that. You don't care about it. What you care about is, did he do his homework? Did he go to bed on time? Right? You understand? That's how parenting works, because you don't care about the credit. Right? So that's what it means to be a remnant. Like, I don't care. I'll do whatever needs to be done. Rav Nachum always used to give the example. You have an appointment with a Fortune 100 company in Manhattan, right? And you go to the building, they own a skyscraper in downtown Manhattan. And you go to the top floor of the penthouse suite, right? It's mahogany walls and high security. And they've got the accountants and the lawyers and the secretaries and the assistants and everybody. Right, you follow? And finally, they usher you into the sanctum of sanctums, and it's the big boss's room, and it's a big wooden door, right? And as you're about to go into the room, there's a crumpled piece of paper on the floor, right? And the accountants aren't picking it up, and the lawyers aren't picking it up, and the assistants aren't picking it up, and the secretary, who picks it up?
the CEO.
CEO picks it up, right? You know? Because it's their business, and that's how they became the CEO. The CEO, right? What's the job definition of a mother?
She's the CEO of the home.
Right, she does whatever needs to be done. Same with the father. I'm not taking one above the other, both of them, right? But you're willing to, right? What makes it, right? Because there's just some jobs you can't pay anyone to do. If you could, you would, but you can't. No one's willing to do it. Right? That's what makes a mother. Right? So the same thing is true with marriage. The same thing is true with anything you want to achieve that's meaningful in life. You make yourself a remnant. And that's how you find great success in life. Because you're willing to do whatever needs to be done. Right? And it's really the secret to American success. Because these people, like Elon Musk, it doesn't do it anymore, but for a long time, he used to sleep on the factory floor. Right? It's because he's got to be there to do what needs to be done, because no one else will be willing to do it. Right? When you're willing to do whatever, you can be successful like that. Jeff Bezos is the same kind of thing. Right? When you're willing to do whatever is willing to be done, that's humility. It's not self-deprecation. It's just getting out of the way so you can see what needs to be done. Making sense?
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Next week.
Rabbi.
Take care. Bye.
Thank you,
Bye.
Rabbi. See you soon, I hope.
That's the plan.